Hey everyone, Maven Huffman here, and from 2001 through 2005, I had the coolest job in the world, WWE wrestler. And backed by popular demand, rating WWE wrestlers I have worked with. Were they cool? Were they jerks? We're gonna find out together. Now, I got a lot of heat last time for laughing at every picture, so I'm gonna try not to do that. Wow, literally a guy that's probably changed the business. Guy I came in with or around about the same time, and probably one of the toughest SOBs I've ever met. We're talking about Brock. Short little fact most people don't know about Brock. I was the first person that Brock ever hit an F5 on. I will say, Brock's done it his way. He's made it known when he doesn't want to do something, and you're not gonna force Brock to do anything that he's not 100% down with. What was he like backstage? Brock always kept to himself. He was always super polite to me, and if we weren't working together, that's where our relationship ended for that day. Brock got pushed to the moon extremely quickly. Did it hold a little bit of animosity backstage? Well, probably. Brock immediately put those worries to rest because he was immediately put into huge angles, and immediately you could see his amateur wrestling background and how just talented, super talented he was. The fact that he was pushed to the moon, A, if you cared, he didn't give a crap. And B, if you had a problem with him, the office didn't care because they knew they were making their money off of him. I'm happy for Brock. I hope he has years of entertainment left in him. Oh my goodness, okay. I'm actually shocked we didn't have this guy the first go round. For my money, hands down, the best entertainer. When I say I was a fan of The Rock, that's doing it a disservice. I was a 6th grade school teacher before I got into wrestling. At my desk, behind my back, there was a huge billboard, and it said, "The Rock Says." And my students would actually bring me action figures, they would bring me pictures. I even had somebody buy me the book, one of my students, The Rock Says. They knew I was that big of a fan. A lot of people always, you try to think you're The Rock. Trust me, I do not. And if I ever want to remind myself that I'm not The Rock, I just take a look at my bank account. What you see on camera, what you see at interviews, what you see on red carpets, what you see in movies, that's him to a T. And I'm gonna out myself for the mark that I truly am. When I first got into the business, when I broke in, Rocky came up to me and was talking to me. Yeah, I was just literally so excited about it. He was like, "Yeah, Maeve, when I get to Seattle, we'll get together and have dinner." I'm like, okay. He took my number and he left me a voicemail that I probably kept for 3 phones after I got rid of that phone. I just kept making sure I saved that voice message. And I probably played it for all my friends. The man, the myth, the legend. Happy he's doing well, because he's a great guy. Trying not to laugh immediately among seeing it. Okay. Hey, guy's a beast. Guy has probably taken his skill of marketing himself to the next stratosphere. Probably had a lot of heat backstage for that ability. I had the good fortune of working with this guy as well. Wasn't the greatest wrestler. He'll tell you he wasn't the greatest wrestler, but he's parlayed that into a ton of money. Of course, we're talking about Bill Goldberg. Quick story about Bill. When Bill came in, I think it was around the 2003 time, there was a lot of heat. He had a lot of heat backstage. Now, this was around the time that the heat I had from Tough Enough was tamping down. So, what did that do? That left room for other people to take heat, because trust me, in a wrestling locker room, someone's gonna have heat. Enter Bill Goldberg. Bill came in and was making a ton of money, and I'm talking in the 7 figures. That wouldn't be a big deal other than the fact that during his time in WCW, he never learned how to work. He didn't know how to learn how to tell a story in a match. Didn't have to. All of his matches consisted of 2 things: spear, jackhammer. Well, 3 things: spear, jackhammer, pinfall. When that's the extent of every wrestling match you have, what's the motivation to go out there and learn? What's the motivation to learn how to not call a match backstage, but call it out there when you listen to what the people want? I'm shocked he's still doing it at this age, but I'm happy that his body's healthy enough and holding up. I wish Bill will. Okay. This one's gonna be quick. I didn't really know her too much. We're talking about China, Joni Lawler. She left right at the beginning of my run. I only was able to be around her and meet her, a handful of times, and it's a true shame that she's no longer with us. That said, she had a lot of heat, and she did not make many friends for two reasons. One, she was getting pushed to the moon, and there's a lot of people that did not want to see her wrestling men. They did not want to see her having the success as wrestling men, because what does that do? That completely destroys kayfabe. Now, what do I mean by kayfabe? Kayfabe is don't let the fans in on what the whole business is. The fact that she was out wrestling guys, that did not sit well with many backstage, but once again, this is Vince's baby. It's not for us to make the decision. Second reason she had a lot of heat backstage, it always would circulate backstage that she would not want to share a dressing room with some of the other girls. Again, I don't know if that's to be true. That's just what the rumor was and what I heard. I'm saddened that she's no longer with us. So hope she's resting well. Not only am I envious of this man's wrestling career, I'm more envious of this man's post-wrestling career. I could stand to learn a lot about the financial industry from this guy. Of course, I'm talking about Hall of Famer JBL. One of the toughest SOBs. I still remember a match he had at a pay-per-view, and after the match, he comes back and his whole entire face is just bloody and just battered. Never heard any complaining. You never heard any type of him being upset in any way. The man knew how to do business. Now, the dirt sheets will always say that JBL was a bully backstage. To be honest with you, JBL's just loud. JBL's boisterous. JBL's jovial. John's not afraid to tell you what he wants, and he's not afraid to tell you how he's gonna get to what he wants. A lot of people that might view as being a bully. John's also a pretty stiff wrestler, from what I've heard. That means when John hits you with a clothesline, you're gonna feel that clothesline. But that's the business. I never knew him as a bully, but sometimes when people are loud, it might rub people the wrong way. But trust me, one of the nicest guys in the world. Of course, Shane O'Mac. We would go out and Shane would find himself out in a social environment with us. He never felt really like Vince's son. He actually felt like one of the boys. Shane would pull me aside many times and tell me, hey man, I think you can do big things. I think you can do this or that, or I like the way you did this. A lot of people don't realize that when Shane got into the business, his dad made him earn it. Most people look at Shane and, here comes the money, think that he had everything handed to him. Could not be further from the truth. When Shane broke in, Shane was on ring crew. Shane was putting the ring together for live events, taking it down at the end of live events. Shane was the first one to get to places, to learn how to take bumps, to learn how to actually do what we did in the ring. This man's put the work in. I have nothing but respect for Shane. I like Shane a lot. Hope he's doing well. If you're gonna give me Shane, of course, you gotta follow it up with Steph. My first interaction with Stephanie was in Tough Enough. For Tough Enough, we would literally film, all day. And then we would get to do our workouts at night. Now, where we would work out was at the WWE main office in Stamford, Connecticut. On one day, in walks Stephanie. And Stephanie, she was the first one that told me that made me get my eyebrows done. And to this day, I still get more heat for getting my eyebrows done like this. But if I don't, it literally looks like two caterpillars racing towards my nose. This is a much better look. Like it, hate on it, I don't care. Thank you, Stephanie, for telling me that. Stephanie is so far ahead of the curve when it comes to her thought process for this business. Stephanie was always very cool, and more than anything, Stephanie was very fair with me backstage. If I did something that wasn't up to par, she was quick to tell me. But if I did something that she approved on or she wanted me to build on for the next show, she was equally there. Maven, hey, this you did this, this worked good. Let's try to do this next time, make it even better. You're gonna realize very, very quickly that she is not where she is because of nepotism, not at all. She's there because of intelligence and because of the time that she's put into this business. I hope that she's able one day to pass this company off to her kids and keep it going for years to come. Okay, who is next? Oh my goodness. If somebody says think of wrestling, my mind immediately goes to two people. One, Ric Flair. Two, Hulk Hogan. Interesting Hulk Hogan story. WrestleMania 18 Toronto. I'm doing an autograph signing, and out of the corner of my eye, I look over and I see Hulk Hogan walk in. So I get giddy, and after we're done, I'm walking up and I'm gonna shake his hand. Obviously, show respect, tell him it's such a pleasure meeting him. No part of me expecting him to know who I was, but he immediately, Maeve, brother, shook my hand, could not have been nicer, and he asked me a question I never thought he would ask me. He said, Maeve, brother, can my son get a picture with you? Mind blown. I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, my gosh, absolutely. It was still one of the coolest experiences of my life, and he probably saw me cheesing from ear to ear just with being able to have a chance to meet Hulk Hogan. How was he backstage? Terry always was polite. We didn't have much of a relationship like backstage, but I completely understood. Couldn't have been nicer to me. I do know he was had some issues with some racial slurs a few years back. Was that a side I ever saw of him? Absolutely not. But do I condone using racial slurs of any sort? Absolutely not. I know he's asked for forgiveness, and if he asks for forgiveness, if his heart asks for forgiveness, he's gonna definitely get it from me. Terry, I hope you're doing well, my friend. Okay, I get asked all the time, who's the hands down toughest guy that you've ever worked with? This is who my money would be on. I'm talking about three-time Olympian Kurt Angle. There would be times him and Brock would get in the ring, and before, like this is hours before the show would go live, and watching these guys, just get the better of each other, amazing, like just next level. Kurt backstage, always very nice to me, always very helpful. I worked with him a handful of times. Kurt was the most intense guy in that ring, next to Benoit, next to Eddie. One of the funniest human beings I've ever been around. He literally had us all in stitches with the pre-tapes he was doing. When he went and shaved his head, I was fortunate enough to be able to do that segment with him where he was talking about and had the wig on. And I told him being bald wasn't too bad of a thing. Kurt was very gracious with helping me out with something as small as that. He didn't have to, but he was. Kurt also kept to himself, and I completely understand why, knowing what he was dealing with outside the ring. I wish Kurt nothing but the best. All right, let's see who's next. I was actually hoping that we were gonna get to do this guy. Go ahead and show you who it is. Bob Holly. A lot of times people think of bullies. The one name that would always come to people's mind was Bob Holly. I'm here to tell you, this is my experience, my opinion. There could not be anything further from the truth. Bob used to get a bad rap for that issue that took place that day on Tough Enough. I was there, I was ringside watching what he was doing. Was Bob a little bit probably overzealous in the boots he was delivering to Matt? Maybe a little bit. However, was it something that wasn't going to happen in 50 house shows moving forward? No. It was going to happen week after week after week after week. We have a very physical sport. We have a business that literally is inches from being real or fake, and sometimes that inch mark, you cross the line. I worked with Bob, I think, for about 3 weeks once they finally put me on the house show schedule, and Bob was kind of a buffer to break you in. They wanted to see how you were going to react because they knew Bob was going to make you earn your place. I never complained. All I did after every match was thank him and hug him, and literally after those 3 weeks were done, I earned Bob's respect. Bob and I have been friends ever since, to the point to where whenever I do see him, we immediately both smile and hug because we know what we've both been through, and obviously there's a mutual respect there. I push back on anybody that ever says this man's a bully. Bob, I hope somewhere you're racing cars. I hope somewhere you're happy, and I wish you the best, brother. Okay, if I tell you from the early 2000s, name one female wrestler, I'm almost positive the name that's going to pop into your mind, Trish Stratus. Trish is, I would say, an icon when it comes to just gorgeous women that enter this business. And I remember I had a little mini crush on Trish. I found myself sitting next to her on a plane, completely harmless, but for probably the better part of 10 hours, I was, in that nervous anticipation. You're getting ready to go on a date. She was probably thinking of everything but that. But Trish is a sweetheart, and what she has meant to women's wrestling can never be understated. I know that every female wrestler that enters this business owes her a debt. The two women that I think of when I think of women's wrestling, Trish and Lita. Trish, I thank you for what you've meant for the world of professional wrestling and what you've brought to the women's division. Okay. One of the most successful wrestlers since the 90s. I don't recall ever going to an arena and not hearing his chant. You know who I'm talking about, RVD. Rob is just one of the coolest guys you've ever seen. He's just carefree. Backstage, Rob's one of the tough ones. So he's one of the legit guys. When it comes to what Rob has done in the ring, innovator, legendary. Rob was funny backstage in the aspect of, we're all back there. We're all trying to, like I said earlier, I'm trying to, get my eyebrows perfect. Rob was just living. Rob was backstage and he was literally taking baby powder, putting it under his arm, and Rob was just one of the truly one of the most individuals I've ever met. And I'm not even saying just in this business. Now, when everybody thinks of Rob, most people are going to think of 420. Rob does not hide his affinity for marijuana, and like him or not, he doesn't care. Rob never made any bones about the fact he liked to get high. He wasn't going to apologize. He was never sorry that he was going to go get high. I'll be honest with you, I have no idea how he got past as many drug tests as we had back then. But then again, the wellness policy didn't exist during my time. Rob, I hope you're happy, and somewhere, my brother, I hope you're high. All right, let's see who's next. Oh my goodness. Big Papa Pump. Where in the world to start with this guy? Scott rubbed a lot of people the wrong way in the locker room. Shockingly, and I don't know how, but I have a pinfall victory against this man. Going into that match, it was just a house show. I was a little nervous. There's two guys that in the 80s and 90s were quintessential tough guys in this business, him and his brother. I think where he got a lot of the heat was when he came in, the very first, I believe the very first program they put him with in like the 2003 time was with Hunter. And I don't think Scott was, cardiovascularly up to the challenges. I know he had, at that time, had drop foot, which definitely affects, people. Then again, I don't think people paid their hard-earned ticket money to watch Scott Steiner wrestle a 5-star match. I think people paid their money to watch Scott come out and shake, flex, do a couple push-ups, and look like one of the biggest freaks on earth. And if that's how you rate someone, you got your money's worth. I was never really close with Scott backstage, but that was probably because Scott was at a different different place in his life. Scott had put in his time. I remember watching Scott as a child, and years of doing this business. Eventually, you're going to be in this business for what can wrestling give me. Scott gave to the business. It was just that wrestling's time to give back. Scott had some enemies backstage, but that's probably just because, just like with RVD, Scott was an individual. And if you like Scott, Scott didn't care. If you dislike Scott, Scott didn't care. Scott, I hope you're well, my friend. All right, so who's next? Let's see. I'm actually shocked it took us this long to get to this guy. You're probably not a wrestling fan, if not for Stone Cold Steve Austin. Steve is another guy that backstage, I mean, it's intimidating being around him. I mean, it's the rattlesnake. It's Stone Cold. We were at a WrestleMania, and we went off, and I think it was me and Sylvain Grenier from La Resistance. We ended up, let's go get a workout in. So we found a Gold's Gym, and we went off, and I put my put my earphones on, and I'm off, minding my own business, getting a workout in. And then next thing I know, I feel across my back, and I turned around, and it was Steve. But the fact that in a gym that had nothing to do with the show, the fact that he was showing a nobody, a less than mid-carder at the time, which I was, but the fact that he was coming over to just say hello, man, that always just shows me the kind of person that Steve is. And people always want to know what was Austin like backstage. Austin, there are three guys I can't imagine what their lives must have been like, and that's Steve, Rocky, and Cena, because all three of those guys are constantly being pulled, and just everyone wants a piece of them at all times. He's not really close with guys backstage, but that's because the minute he gets to a show, or would get to the show, everybody wants a bit of him, and there's never just a split second that he can have to himself. Early in my career, he walked out, and I think I've heard others talk about how he took his ball and went home with it. Steve had a reason for not wanting to do business. Do I necessarily have to agree with that reason? No. I mean, a lot of guys view that Steve, was giving up on us. One thing I do know is our house show checks were a lot better when Steve was there. And by a lot better, I mean twice as much. Did it affect my wallet? It absolutely did when he left. That being said, I don't know what's going on in another man's head, and I don't have the ego to think that I can judge why they do whatever they do. I have to trust that he's making the best decisions for him and his family, and I have to respect that fact. I certainly am glad that he came back, and I'm certainly glad I was able to have the small interactions I had with him. Steve, I hope somewhere you're cracking a beer. I hope your feet are up. I hope you're overlooking acres upon acres that you own. You earned every bit of it, brother. Hope you're well. Now, I've worked with plenty of other wrestlers other than these guys and gals. To see my ratings for those, click the video on screen.